And we're both on the Access product team, so we're the guys that are on the team that are making this product. So we're really glad to be here and hopefully teach you something you didn't know before. So our goals in this session are to leave you understanding what apps for Office is as a technology. It's a new technology, but it's been out for a year or so. We're going to talk about how apps for Office impacts Access web apps, which is a brand new feature that is only available in the last 6 weeks. So this is something that's very new. And we're going to go under the hood to show you how this works. So what are the technology that, how do you create these things? So hopefully you'll leave the session knowing that you can use apps for Office with very little or no skill whatsoever. But to build them, there's a little more in depth to it, some Visual Studio kind of things, but you can get value right away. And the store mechanism for getting these will be available soon. Not quite yet, but pretty soon. So our agenda for today is first we're going to talk about Access and Access web apps, just so that we're all on the same page. Access web apps has been out for a while now, but it's one of those secrets that people don't know about. And if you have Office 365, this is software that you've already paid for and have, so why not get the value out of that? Again, we'll dig into apps for Office as a technology and what it means for Access web apps, and finally we're going to go into the technical details on that. And okay, first, so Access web apps. This is Access 2013, and this capability has actually been out since 2010, but we re-architected it. What we're talking about now is the old Access databases that everyone knows and loves, except now they're running on the web. So it's a web page interface. The data all lives in a back end. We sometimes hear this called Access Services. Access Services is the feature that you can turn off if you have an Office 365 account. You can go in there and see that service, whether it's on or off. And it is a SharePoint app. So we're talking about a SharePoint app, just like a document library is a SharePoint app, that you create, and it's data-centric, so it has data in it, but the back end is in SQL. And by the way, that's sort of hidden from you in that you don't have to know anything about SQL. You don't have to set anything up. You don't have to get IDs. It's handled for you. And it's a very simple method for creating an Access database that runs on the web. You use the Access Desk client to do that. So the desktop client that you all know and love now has the ability to create web apps. So again, it's a big feature of Office 365. So before people panic, realize that the old desktop Access apps are still around. So we're still shipping new versions of the Access desktop client. So if you have applications running Access, don't worry, that's not being abandoned. It's still there. But what we're going to talk about here is a new feature of that, where if you do have Office 365 or on-prem versions of SharePoint, that you can actually create, using the desktop app, a web application. And your data and everything lives up into that app. When you're done, you can throw Access away, the desktop client, and use this app up in the web because it is a SharePoint app. Now, there's some terms that are confusing. SharePoint apps and apps for Office get confused with people. So when we say a SharePoint app, we're talking about I go into SharePoint, I go into Site Contents, I say New, and I have all these templates of things I can create. So those are SharePoint apps, and they live in SharePoint, and they do SharePoint things. Apps for Office is a technology for extending the functionality of your Office applications. So, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so on. In the past, you had to write DLLs, and you'd write some code, and you'd write to the object model to extend those products and do custom things. The problem with that, of course, is that it was very limited to the platform and version control and DLL and security. So there's real issues with doing it the old way. So this new way is essentially creating these add-ins for Office that are iframes that live inside of your application, and they then expose functionality out. So you're going to see lots of examples of this, but realize that SharePoint apps are apps that live in SharePoint that we're going to be creating with Access, but apps for Office is an extension mechanism for your Office apps, which in our case includes the apps that we create in SharePoint with Access. So where does this fit on the scale of skills? So apps for SharePoint are low skilled, right? Because I can go into my SharePoint app and I can say, create me a document library, and it does it for me. I can also, if I have the skills, I can create one using Visual Studio and JavaScript and CSS and so on. So they can be used by high-skilled people, used by low-skilled people, but created by high-skilled people, or in between, somewhere in that frame. But when we talk about apps that we create for SharePoint with Access, we're really aiming towards the power user. So the person who creates and defines this database, their skill requirements are very, very low. Basically, if you can create an Excel spreadsheet and put a formula in it, that's the person that we're sort of targeting there. So that's for Access services, the power user end of the spectrum, not the Visual Studio end of the spectrum. There's an area in between. If you ever guys play with Napa, it's a tool on the web for creating apps for Office. It's a nice, good way of getting started if you want to finally end up with, doing Visual Studio kind of things. So let's look up at the big picture, the architecture we're talking about. This is a data-centric application, which is a SharePoint app that I created with Access. So what are the pieces? Well, there's a SQL database backend. It's actually Windows Azure. So Azure is doing that data store, but like I said, that's obfuscated from you. In that you don't have to know that. Now, we do let you get to it directly if you want to and have the skills, but for the general person, that data is just there. It's handled for them. It's backed up. It's geo-replicated, the whole thing. It's part of your Office 365. The application interface is SharePoint. So in SharePoint, things like the theme I inherit from the rest of the site, security I get from the site, it's a SharePoint app, which is really nice. And because it's a web application, now I don't worry about versions of the database. I don't worry about multiple people using it at the same time because I can, and I don't have to install something on your machine. I just give you access to the site, and then you can go ahead and use that. So there's some real advantages to having your data-centric application up in the web. So we can talk about it a long time, but let's go ahead and jump into a demo. So Andrew's going to steal control of the session.
Okay. Let me take over, and I'm going to show you guys an Access web app living in Office.
You're muted. Oh. There.
Okay, I'm going to take over and show you guys an Office web app living in Office 365 right now. So to do that, I need to share my screen. So this is a live Office 365 account running right now. Here I'm on the site contents page, and you can see all these other Access apps that I already have installed on the site contents. To add a new Access app, all you have to do is click Add an App. Is that updating on your machine? Okay. Now click and just search for Access in the search box, and you'll see this Access app icon here. This is going to create a new Access app, which here we're going to call the consumption log. When I hit create, that's going to create a SQL Azure database in the back end and a SharePoint app on the front end to show you the data. So that only takes a couple minutes for Office 365 to do all that work, but for time's sake, I'm going to show you what would happen once this was fully created. So this is then what you get, and it's a completely blank app. To actually edit the app, you're going to need the Access client. So to open this app in Access, all you have to do is click the link to open this app in Access. Hit OK at the bottom, and you'll see Access launch and open up that app. Now for this demo, we showed it at TechReady, which at TechReady there's a lot of networking that goes on amongst Microsoft employees and a lot of socializing afterwards. So we actually wanted to create a consumption log that will show us all the different drinks and food that we consumed during the TechReady presentation. So to start creating the app, I'm going to have to start creating some tables. Luckily, Access has a lot of table templates built in that we can use right out of the box. So to find one that'll be good for consumption log, all I have to do is search for it. Consumption log. When I hit enter, you'll see the search results that came up. the first one being our consumption log. Now when I click that, it's not just one table. It's creating several tables in the background with the relationships between them. We've found out that through creating databases over the years, relationships are something that are very hard for people to understand. But if we can show you how relationships are done, people are more likely to understand how it works. So here we've created several different tables, a consumption log table, an items table, but really we want to be able to see what this is created in the web. So to do that, you just click the Launch App button here in the top left, and that's going to, actually I need to use Internet Explorer. So all I need to do here is refresh this, and it'll show you what it's actually created. So here is the UI is already ready, the database is in the back end. I can actually start using this app to start entering the things that I consumed. So for example, before my Tech Ready session, I was out socializing and had an amber ale created by Alaskan. Now there's categories to these items. And so this is just a quick run through of some of the features that Access has. This one happens to be the autocomplete. So this item is a beer, but you'll notice that I hadn't actually added any items to the categories table yet. But we allow you to quickly be able to do that right through that UI. So I typed in beer, it didn't find anything. I can now create a record in the category table for beer. I save that record, and when I cancel out, you'll see that beer has now been added into this autocomplete control. So I'm ready to save this record as an amber ale. Now I can go and add in the fact that I had one of these. Again, here's the autocomplete control again. I'm just able to type in amber. It knows there's a relationship between the consumption log table and the items table, and so it can quickly just go and add that in. So this site was created, we call it an app in 60 seconds, that we were able to create this app in under 60 seconds. But we can customize it quite a bit from here. So if you added another 10 minutes into this app, you can see there's a lot of more customization that can be done. So this is a final version that one of us on the team created. It took about 10 minutes more. We changed around some of the tables, and we made it a little easier to use the app. So instead of just adding an entry to the database, all I need to do is go find what I actually drank. So here, once I click beers, you'll see that it's showing me all the beers that are in the table. Then I can just click the one that I actually drank and hit drank this, and then it gives me all these options to actually add that in. So that's just a more completely baked app that we have that you can do in about 10 more minutes after your initial 60 seconds. So I'm going to give it back over to Gary to show some of the pieces of those apps and why Access is so powerful.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Let's get back to our slides here. So this session isn't about really Access web apps. We have to cover that, though, so you understand about apps for Office extending the functionality of this product. So what you saw was a reasonably polished, oh, we're still loading here. I'll wait for you guys. There we go. So the interface was generated for you. So in this case, we used a table template, and it defined the date, the schema, and all the fields. Now, from that, the product automatically generates the UI. So the table's on the left. It generates the views across the top, so you can have different views of the same table. It has a item picker where you can sort and filter and look for things, and then also has details. So that was all created for you. So if you wanted to build one from scratch, it'd be pretty easy just to define your tables, and you need to define relationships between the tables. We're trying to make the concept of relational databases usable by people who don't have those skills or don't have to know those skills. They can understand that I've outgrown my Excel spreadsheet. I need to move this data to something better, and we want to be that solution. All right, so enough about Access Web Apps, which is our life here. Let's jump into apps for Office and what they are. So I mentioned before, they're extensions to your Office application. So if you want to do something to Word, something fancy, and you want it to work both on the rich client on your Windows app or also in the web, or maybe on your phone or whatever device it is, this is the way to do it. You need to use technologies that works on all those things. So also being a web component there, it can be used by many people. And let's go ahead and, Andrew's going to jump in and show us what they look like. So before that, let me just mention this is going to be Excel. Remember that apps for Office work in all the Office clients. Again, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so on, and even Outlook.
Okay, I'm going to show you current Excel 2013 functionality in using Office web apps. Let me share my desktop again. Should be there. Okay, so this is a blank Excel spreadsheet, and this functionality shipped in Office 2013. You can go try it out right now. To insert one, you just simply go to the Insert tab and hit My Apps. To actually populate the My Apps part, you need to go to the store, and the store includes all of the apps for Office that are in our Office store. So most of them you can see are free. You just click one of these and add it to your apps. So today I'm going to be showing you the Bubbles app, which is created by one of the guys on our team. So there you just hit My Apps and then select Bubbles, and it's a cool, different sort of chart representation of data. To get started with it, you're going to notice that these apps for Office can interact with the host document, in this case, the workbook. So for example, if I hit this sample table button right over here, when I click it, you're going to notice that it inserted data into my worksheet. So that's just one of those interactions that an app for Office can have between itself and the host. So once I've done that, I can select this table that was just inserted, hit OK, and you'll see it's giving me a graphical representation of the data that's in this table. So the color is determined by the second column over here, and its size is over here. Just to give you a little cooler representation, I'm going to delete these out, leave Seattle, add in Denver, just to if there's any Denver fans on the call. And if you remember the Super Bowl, which I certainly do, then it was 43-8 was the final Super Bowl score. And so you can see that this app got events from the host that I added in this new data, 43-8, and it updated its UI to reflect that. So here's a good graphical representation of how the Super Bowl ended up. So there's been a quick demo of apps for Office. There's many in the store, especially for Excel. I encourage you to just go to the Insert tab, hit Store. You can see all of them in there, and try them out. Well, the rest of the presentation will be how we've added in these apps for Office into Access. So Gary, I'm going to send it back to you if I can.
All right, so you can see that this is one way of extending your Office application. That little box that was an iframe running into the Excel rich client and interacted with the data inside of Excel, and events were happening and so on. But some end user could just drop it into their thing and select the data and be working. They don't have to know a lot about the technology, and yet this will work on the web or inside of the rich client. So there's some real advantages to this method of extending your Office application. So another thing is here's a screenshot of Outlook. And you may have seen these. If not, you're going to see it pretty soon, that Outlook is another endpoint that they can extend with Apps for Office. And Outlook is a little bit different. Your Apps for Office and Outlook are bound to your current message. So when you're looking at an email message, it can do things. In this example, it's filtering through your email message and finding any addresses. And if it finds an address, it prompts you and says, hey, I found an address. Do you want to see it? And then it can show you actually a map view of that. This is a demo we do all the time. It's really nice. So if you're reading some email, and inside the email is an address, and it just says, hey, do you want to see that? And it uses the Bing Map service. So essentially, this little iframe appears inside your email, and then you can get more information. You could think of the kind of things you could do with this. What if whenever someone sends you a question and their account number is inside the email, and you can just have an app for Office that looks up in your mainframe information about that customer's account number. Or it could look for Social Security numbers, or it could warn you that, hey, you have you're sending an email with the Social Security number in it, and those kind of things. So it's a way for you to extend the functionality of the endpoint using new technologies, which we'll dig into. So this was Outlook. An example. This is a little more details about Outlook. Again, it searches, but also in Word. Here's an example of using a translator. So I could have inside my Word document a little task pane, we call it on the side there, that as I highlight text, it can look it up for me and translate its language. And I know recently we added Klingon as one of the languages we translates to, so it's kind of interesting. So this is the technology for extending your applications, your Office applications. So the advantages there is that there's no DLL. Again, in the old days, if I want to do something custom with Office, I want to do some kind of add-in, I went into Visual Studio and I wrote it and I created a DLL and I had to install it. And then a new version of Office came out and I have to go revisit it and so on. So this is really easy to update because remember, that's a web page we're connecting to. So if I decide that I now want to extend the map to have more functionality, I can just do that. And then everyone who uses it, they go to the iframe, they actually get that new functionality. So it's a web page, and so if I update the web page, everyone gets it. There's also an ecosystem of people that develop these. So there's a store, so people can create those and sell them, or they give them away for free. There's a lot right now. If you go into the Office store and look up for Apps for Office, you'll see lots. You won't see any for Access yet. Look for those next month. But the whole point is that I can go in the business of creating these, or I can just be a user of those. Or I can also just, if I'm a consultant, I can create them and not sell them or not give them away, but I can use them with my clients. I can actually bypass the store and deploy them on the customer, their site. So we have a multi-platform technology. Again, if I'm sitting on a non-Windows interface, so I'm in a web browser or I'm on a different piece of technology, it'll work there too because they're just HTML and JavaScript. So this has been around for a while. Apps for Office has been around for a while, and Access Web Apps has been around for a couple of years. But what's new and what we're talking about here is the fact that I can now actually create apps for Office that work in Access Web Apps. So we have partners creating these, also just developers in general creating and selling apps for Office. There's a Visual Studio template, so if you want to build them yourself, you can go in and say, I want to build an app for Office, and we're going to show you some of that. How do I build this? Where do I put it in my JavaScript? How do I, what are all the questions there? And there's lots of samples and documentation, again, because apps for Office has been out for a while, and what's new is just a new endpoint, which is Access. For the store, at least initially, any apps you build that work in Access will need to be free, not charged. And the reason for that is there's a licensing issue where an app for Office is actually licensed per user. And remember, Access Web Apps are SharePoint apps, and SharePoint apps are site licensed. So when I put it in a site, anyone who has access to that site can use it. So there's a problem with the licensing model that we're working on. So initially, at least for the first 6 months probably, only free ones for the store that work for Access will be available. So, but hopefully we'll fix that. So now we're going to see another demo of an app for Office running inside of an Access web app. And this is an app that we created for our team to sort of dog food and try it out. And
okay, thank you, Gary. So I'm going to run through some apps for Office that we've added into some of our Access web apps. This one is probably my favorite demo. This is, we call it Where We've Been, but the Access team consists of about 70 people. And so we created this app that shows people where in the world they have been and also where in the world they come from. So you can see here this map from Bing. Bing Maps is an app for Office. So it's getting the data from the form, from the table, and is displaying it in the map. We asked everybody on the team to go in into the app and add in all the countries that you've been to and also what your home country is. So on this app for Office, you can see where we have been in the world. And the bigger the circle, the more people have been there. So, 60 people have been to the United States, and 14 have been to India. You can see that. You can scroll in, and it updates. Here's a quick picture of Europe, where everybody has been. And so it's just a way to augment your Access app. The data was already there. The app didn't add any data to the app for Office didn't add any data to the Access app, but it is a cool way to visualize the data that's in your Access app. So this Bing Maps is available for Excel right now and will be available for Access when we launch the store, probably in about a couple weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. So there's some other views, other ways to pivot on this data that I also want to show you. So here's our home country list. Again, an app for Office, but this time we are going to use this sort of follow selection. So you don't have to be working on all of the data that's in the current table. You can actually work on the current record. So if you click this button, then as I scroll through these records, it's going to get an update event and show you only that data. So for instance, if you click on my name, I'm actually originally from the United Kingdom, so it only shows you that dot. Hopefully it's coming through, but that dot's in the United Kingdom. For instance, I can use our search function and search for Gary. You'll notice his name comes up, and he's from America. So I can then untoggle that, and then I'm working on the full table of data again. So this just shows the sort of differences that we have in APIs, where you can work against the full table if you want to, or you can work just against the current record. We have our home countries total table. This one's pretty interesting. This is where we all from, but aggregated. So you can see that a good majority of us are from the United States, but we have some people from all around the world, really, that are working on Access. Of course, being as competitive as we are on the Access team, people wanted to know who has been to the most countries. So to show that data, we used a different Access app, which is actually the one that Visual Studios gives you straight out of the template, which is just a chart. So here is the chart of who has been to the most places. Here on this side is sorted by name. On this side is sorted by how many countries they've actually been to. You can see that Gary has been to 24 countries. He's meeting me by 2. I've only been to 22 countries, so it looks like I need to go take some vacation. But it was easy to add these in. All you have to do is go to the store, add them in, and then bind them. And the binding process is what I'm going to show next. And to do that, I'm going to go back to the NFL. Sorry if people are a little sick of my NFL references yet. But here we have the data from this year's NFL. So you can see here are all the teams, and the size of the dot, again, we've added both apps for Office into the same form. The size of the dot is how many wins that particular team has had that season, and then also just a graph showing you the number of wins on the side. Of course, everybody knows that the Seattle Seahawks had the most number of wins. But once we insert this agave, we need to actually bind it to the data. And here, this one's already bound, but I'm going to show you what that process looks like. So to bind it, we click the little question mark, then hit Select Data. This is the binding prompt that we developed in Access to help you get the app for Office to understand what data it needs to work on in the host app. So we've given you an example on the left side, which is location and data. So for Washington and 70, or California and 45. So I need to map that location and data to fields I have in my app. So to do that, I just click down here, and you'll see all the fields that I have in this form. So for the location data, I actually want their stadium address. And for the data portion, here I wanted to show wins. But maybe instead of wins, which you guys just saw, maybe I want to show losses instead. So I can just rebind the data to the losses column. And when I hit OK, it updates and shows you now how many losses there were. I actually went to school in Texas, so this one does hurt a little bit that Houston had so many losses. But even better than showing wins or losses is probably showing them together. So again, I can rebind this data. For the location field, I'm going to hit the stadium address again. And then for the data, I'm going to hit wins, and then also add in the losses column. So this binding prompt is very flexible in how you can specify the data that you want to show. So when I hit OK there, it's going to actually show that data all together. So you can clearly see the difference between Seattle's team here that had a lot of wins, that's the blue circle, and few losses, the red circle, versus Houston down here that had a lot of losses and very few wins. So this has been a quick demo of apps for Office inside of Access web apps and the power that they can bring in visualizing your data. We'll go on to a couple more scenarios later that aren't only visualization, but we just wanted to show you the quick power of them right now. So I'll give it back to Gary.
Great, thanks, Andrew. So yeah, that big map is nothing more than the one that works with Excel, but we made a few changes to it to work with Access, and you'll be seeing that in the store hopefully in the next couple weeks. So I hope you get the idea that extending Office application by dropping in these add-in components, these apps for Office, really has a lot of usefulness. So what may not have been clear is that how did I add that to my web app? Well, up in the corner, we're going to show you that there's a little gear for your web application to go ahead and say, I want to insert an app for Office. And that brings up a prompt from the store and from your insertion things. But I can also, to make those available, an admin can actually add these to their site. So if I add a manifest file to my site, then end users can go add that map, if I'm using the map one, to all their different kind of things. That's what I mentioned earlier about possibly bypassing the store altogether. I add a manifest to the app catalog, and I can use that. So right today, you can do that, and the demos you're seeing now were all added to the app catalog, again, bypassing the store, because the store is not quite ready. We're waiting on the store guys to deliver a couple features, which is coming really, really soon. Our goal is to have it by the second week of May, so hopefully we'll make that deadline, and then you can go in and look around and see what's available in the store. We've been working with MS Research on getting some different things in the store, so we're really kind of happy about that. So when you do the insertion, you get the insertion dialog. So I say I want to add an app for Office, and up comes this dialog, and let me just slide over a little bit. So I get a dialog where I get to select the app I want. I can also bypass that and say, just show me the store. Currently, you can only insert apps from my organization. Those are the ones from your app catalog, so your site. Things essentially already registered on your site. You went and you added that manifest to your site. But again, coming real soon will be the store and also featured apps, which are just ones essentially advertising. So adding it's only half the story, right? I drop that map onto my form. Great, life is nice. But interaction is what the value is in. So how do I tell my data, or my app for Office what to do and with what data? So we call that the binding process. So there's three different ways of binding. One, the author of the app for Office, if he knows the name of what he wants to bind to, so if you always have a table from a template that's called customers, it's always called customers, you can just bypass asking the end user anything. You can just say, bind to table called customers. So it's bind by name. So I can do that and bypass the whole process of binding from the end user altogether. Also, what you saw Andrew do was bind by prompt, where he went in there and selected the NFL team and site location. So that's an interactive, ad hoc kind of bind method, which is really handy because then you can write your app for Office to be generic and say, you just tell me what data you want me to show or interact with. So I have a really nice, rich binding prompt. And the last method is bind by selection. In Excel, for example, I can drop in that bubble chart, and then I can just drag across some data grid and then hit bind to that, so bind what's selected. We can't really bind by selected from Access databases because we can't select more than the current row. And once the binding is set, the author of it saves it, so the next user goes in doesn't have to do that. So I might set the binding up, and then everyone who uses that app, it's already bound. So they never get that prompt. So that prompt really is sort of the developer or the power user who drops it in, binds the data, and then sends everyone the URL and says, hey, go look at my really cool app and see what it does. So we're going to make you guys switch yet again for another demo.
Thank you, Gary. So this demo, I'm going to be showing an app that I created. You'll see it right here. I do want to take one quick second and just emphasize what Gary just said about the store. So if you remember back to that consumption log that we made at the very beginning, to add an app for Office, you simply click on the gear in the top right, and you'll see the little drop down hopefully come up in just a sec. Okay. So here in this gear in the top right, then you just hit the Apps for Office button, and you'll see our store experience come up. Right now, these apps are hosted locally on our SharePoint site as the store is not quite ready. But soon, in addition to this My Organization tab, you'll see the My Store tab. And that's where you can get the apps from the store. And this My Organization tab will, of course, also be here. So you can also see the ones that you've installed locally in your app catalog. So back to the Facebook demo. Here we wanted to show that you can do not only just show UI, that's not only a UI feature for data that's in your app, but it can actually import data into your app as well. So this is just a little agave I wrote, an app for Office. It's available for Excel right now, and it will be available for Access when we launch. And all it will do is insert your Facebook friends. So if you wanted to create an app, for instance, one of our team members just got married, he wanted an app for his wedding, and he wanted a guest list. So instead of having to type in all the names, he just wanted to get a dump of his Facebook friends and then decide which of those he was going to invite. So to do that, you just click once you've logged into Facebook, you click the Insert Friends, and it's going to show you, again, the example table, and it's going to need a first name, last name, birthday, and gender field, as well as a field to store the Facebook ID. So really quick, we're just going to bind it. This one's pretty simple. I have those fields in my app, so I'm just going to bind the fields up, first name to the F name field, last name to the L name field, scroll across, put the birthday to the birthday field, and the gender field. When I hit OK, it's going to go to Facebook. It went to Facebook, grabbed all the friends, and now when I come back to this list view, you'll see that they've all been inserted And then it becomes a UI feature. So first it grabbed all the data from Facebook and actually inserted that into my app using one of those data APIs that can cross the boundary between the apps for Office and the host application. And then as I scroll down, it shows me the picture of that person as well as the mutual friends that I have with that person. So Gary and I are friends on Facebook. I can just type in just Gary, and there you go. You can see Gary's Facebook picture. So we just wanted to give this demo to show that these are not just UI features. They actually have access to the data of the app, which makes them even more powerful. So I'll give it back to Gary to talk a little bit more about that.
Great, thanks, Andrew. So I hope you're thinking of business scenarios, just personal scenarios that you could do with apps for Office. So the store, in the existing store, again, for other endpoints, other things like Word and Outlook and PowerPoint and so on, there's already a whole ecosystem of those, and there will be a bunch coming from Access also real soon. So the store is sort of the part that makes this very interesting for people who don't want to spend a lot of time knowing about these things. There's going to be a bunch of free ones. Just use the free ones. Or you might have a scenario where I need to talk to SAP. I need to go out and go to a mainframe. I need to go interacting. In this case, you saw the Facebook demo where we went out and pulled information from Facebook. We can read information in. We can write information back. Whatever you can do with some JavaScript, with some limitations due to security, but you can do. So think about ways of using that. Now, a big caveat is that when I pointed out the Word example, it used a task pane. So task pane is on the side of your screen, and it sits there for the whole session. So as you interact with your data, like that was a translator kind of thing. Access apps can only do what's called a content app for Office. The content ones are the ones that live within inside of the host. So in Excel, we use that bubbles. That bubble example was a content example. It lives inside of it, which means if you switch to another spreadsheet, it's not there anymore. Same thing with Access. If you switch to a different view, then we go out of scope and we can't interact with it anymore. So you can only use content agaves, which is not a big deal. They'll live on the form, but I just wanted to point that out. So why put these two technologies together? Well, Access web apps, although very, very simple, using templates or from scratch, and we generate the UI for you, and you drop controls in there, it's still a very railed experience, which means it's very easy to do the things that we think you want to do. If you want to do things beyond that, it becomes, well, basically impossible. Like, again, if I wanted to go out to Facebook from it, I couldn't do that without an app for Office. Apps for Office are really good for connecting to external systems. Again, I have JavaScript. I'm going out. I'm calling some APIs. You saw the Bing Maps example. We're using Bing Maps information. We're interacting with external systems. Also, you saw the cool chart, the map with the you saw the bar chart where we had who went to the most countries, pie charts. These are things we do not have in Access web apps. Access as a rich client has lots of visualization, but the web doesn't. So this is a way of visualizing your data in different ways. And by the way, MS researchers created a bunch of new apps for Office to present your data. And just custom solutions. You're thinking, I need a way to pull information from instruments that I have on my laptop that I'm out in the field, and I want to write that immediately into my database record. How do I do that now? So it's a way of extending the functionality we have now. And it really does light up the Office 365. So if you want to go and get a document, a pointer to a document in a document library, or you want to kick off a workflow or something, this is one way you do that. Okay, so now we've talked about what it is in sort of a lot of detail. Now we want to go into, what are the guts? How does this work? How do you create one of these apps for Office? So let's go ahead and dive into some of that. So how does it work? Well, there's a manifest file. So your app for Office as a developer has a manifest file, which is just an XML document. And that XML document describes what the app for Office does. Now, how big is it? Where does it point? If it points to a different data, external system, where does it live, and so on. Also, it's a web page. So it's a web page, and you interact with it through JavaScript. So if you can create a web page, HTML and JavaScript, then you sort of already know that technology. And there's lots of people out there that do, so that's not a brand new technology, which is nice. And then there's an app catalog. Now, if you use this from the store, the app catalog contains the manifest file. So if I go to the store and say I want that bubble one, then what happens is I get a link to that manifest file in the store, and I use it. And every time I instantiate my session, it goes up to the manifest, and it says, oh, it's a new version or whatever, and then it directs me to that iframe, what the container of the iframe is. Or I can put it in my local app catalog. When I say local, I mean your SharePoint account. So your site for SharePoint. So I have a 365 account. I go in there, and there's essentially a special list called an app catalog, and I put the manifest file there. So that's a way to put it in to be local, or if I use the one in the store, the manifest file lives up in the store. So the way these parts interact is that the manifest file either lives in the store or in your app catalog, and it actually points to a web page. So it has a URL inside of it that points to the web page, and that web page is hosted someplace, and it has HTML and JavaScript that interacts with. And there's APIs that you call JavaScript APIs that interact with the host application. So how did we know that we selected a different record in Excel? That fired an event. That event capture and response is happening in JavaScript inside of the app for Office. So we have our Office web app, in this case our SharePoint app created with Access. We have an iframe, which is the part of the screen, that real estate, although you don't have to have any screen, it could work totally invisible. And then within that is your app itself. So your JavaScript is actually interacting. And we've published a set of APIs that have the events and actions like read, write to the host application. And that's where the security is handled, because we only give you a special set of APIs that let you do a certain thing. So you can't just go kind of crazy on that. So one of the things that people don't think of, this is sort of a new way of doing things, is that iframe that points to a web page, where is that web page? Well, it turns out that web page can be anywhere you want. As a matter of fact, it's got to be someplace. So like any web page, you have to put it somewhere so that when I point to it, it works. So the URL is pointed to and the manifest must work. Now, when you're doing development, Visual Studio actually creates a local host web page for you. So during the development process, it's not a problem, because you just point to that local host from your manifest file, put your manifest file in your local app catalog, and do your development. But later on, you might want to put it in Windows Azure. If you put it up on Azure, then I have a URL that's there. It's backed up. I have the geo-replication. I have all the security. I have all the things in there, and that's where it can live. A big requirement, though, is SSL. So your web page must be secure, because otherwise, we don't know what it could do. So we have an SSL requirement that it be up there. During your development process, you can do all the ignoring of the, if you use IE, you can keep ignoring all the warnings that it's not SSL. But when you finally want to publish this, you need to be in SSL. Now, if you do have a MSDN universal account, you can get some free hosting that comes with some hosting time on Windows Azure. So that's something that we personally are doing, is that we use that to create our apps for Office. But bottom line is, any web server that can be reached by your app, when they click on that URL, can be a place where you host that web page that's pointed to by the manifest. So in Visual Studio, you need to have the latest version of Visual Studio, which has a new template for you. And you just instantiate that template, edit it for your need, and then you need to publish both the manifest someplace, and you need to deploy the web page someplace. Or you can just leave it in localhost for now and then change your manifest to point to that. So that's the steps of creating them. And we're going to go take a look at how that works now with Andrew.
Thank you.
Okay, so this demo is just going to use Visual Studio to create an access or an app for Office using the template. I'm going to hold on just a second, because I think it takes a second for the screen to start refreshing. But here you have Visual Studio 2013. To create an app for Office, all you need to do is click the New Project button. Okay, there we go. Now I see them finally updating. Okay, from here, if you have the latest Visual Studio 2013 installed, if you've done all the updates, you will now have this Office SharePoint section. And so you just select the app for Office. I'll call this Webcast Demo. And click OK. Now it's going to ask you a little bit about the type of app that you want to create. So again, my screen seems to be taking just a minute to update. So as Gary already talked about, there are task pane apps and there are content apps, and currently Access is going to be in the content app. There are also mail apps, which Gary did cover. Those are the things for Outlook. So to create one for Access, just select Content, and then click Next in the dialog. You can either create a basic app or a visualization app. We're going to do the visualization one just because it comes with more code that we can then just show working right out of the box. Now here you can see that it says Access and Excel. So if you keep both of those checked, then it's going to create a manifest that will work both in Access and Excel. So I click Finish. It's just going to take a couple seconds to put the whole app in place, but it's going to create a website project and that manifest project to actually make all of this work. And I will quickly show you the manifest part of it, just to put some context into what Gary was saying earlier. There's a lot of stuff in here. You don't really need to, most of it's pretty self-explanatory. I just want to highlight this field. So it's going to use currently the IIS Express version in Visual Studios to launch this thing. But there in the manifest is where you would change it to your hosting whenever you got that. So to debug is pretty easy. You can see that when I hit F5, it's going to spin up a local web server, and it's going to launch Excel, because this is an Excel and an Access app, and it will show you the app right there. So debugging these things is really pretty simple. Just hit F5, it creates an Excel worksheet and inserts it for you. So if I just hit Insert Sample Data, then again you'll see that it used the API to insert data into the workbook, and then it bound to that data and shows you this visualization. So this is the same graph that we were using through the other demos. It's the one straight out of the box in Visual Studio. There's more to the APIs that you can find on MSDN. I don't think we'll go into all of the APIs now, but I encourage you to create the project and then go check out this home.js file that it creates with the Visual Studio thing. And here you can see some of the APIs like binding.getDataAsync. They're all documented very well in Visual Studio, and this project that Visual Studio creates, sorry, they're all documented well on MSDN. Visual Studio shows you how to use some of the more basic get and set data operations. But for time reasons, we probably won't go into what each of those APIs does. So I'm going to give control back to Gary so he can finish talking about the technical aspects.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Let's go ahead and, unfortunately, in this amount of time, we can't turn you guys all into Apps for Office developers. We'd love to, but we can't. So there's a manifest file that was created for you by Visual Studio Template. So when Andrew went in there with nothing up his sleeves and said, create me a new project, and selected the template, we got a manifest file. You got sample HTML, which was that cool bar chart. The JavaScript file was created for you so you could do the binding, and localhost served it all up. So you saw him debugging that in Excel. Now, there's a bunch of apps for Office in the works. Like I say, when the store is open, you're going to see these. But we're going to take a look at a different one that's fresh off the presses as of this week. We just created one, and we're kind of excited about showing you that. So we want to share that one instead of a bunch of bar charts and things. This one's actually pretty cool. And we're going to turn this actually into a workshop where you can actually download this file and do it yourself. So go ahead, and take a look at that.
sorry. You probably missed a good chunk of this demo. So I'll quickly recap. This is a miles app that shows you how many miles are driven, the distance between 2 points, really. This Access app is a miles tracker that is one of the templates that we provide, a fully baked app to let you record all the trips you've done. So for instance, if you have clients or need to track your miles, you can add in your customers and their location and also the location of your business, and then this app for Office will go and get the distance that it would take to travel from your place of business to your customer. So we call this the Bing distance, the route calculator, and we're using one of Bing's APIs that will actually get the distance between 2 points. So here you can see the customer's location is this address here, and we're coming from the Microsoft buildings, so 1 Microsoft Way. And here, inside this border is the app for Office, and you can see that it's read those locations in from Microsoft Way to this address, and it's decided that the distance is 2.4 miles. But we can update this, say the customer has changed address, this is how the actual app for Office would work. So for instance, this customer is now the Obama administration, so they're in the White House. Hit save. You'll notice that the app for Office received an event that the data has changed. So it now knows to get the new location, which is the White House, and also determine the number of miles. So if you were actually going to drive from the Microsoft buildings to the White House, that's 2,718.2 miles. Now we can set this. Normally this would probably auto set into the form, but since we're going to create a workshop out of this app for Office, we decided that we would create this button so it's easier to explain what's actually happening. So when I hit set distance, you'll see over here that currently the distance is 2.4 miles. When I hit set distance, it's going to update this record and put in that it's 2718.2. So then I can hit save there, and now my app knows that whenever I drive to the White House to actually record 2,700 miles. We just wanted to show off this just to show the different, we're going to turn it into a workshop to show the different APIs used, but we also wanted to show that this was very simple to create, and so they can be a little bit more specific. They don't have to be general ones like a chart or a map. You can actually put some business logic into these and really augment your app for Office. So I'll give it back to Gary.
Great, Andrew. And like he mentioned, that's going to be a walkthrough, so you can download and build this yourself. So we're running tight on time, so luckily we're near the very end. So let's go and finish up. So I need to host my web page. I can put it in the store. I need to deploy it. I need to deploy my manifest. I need to deploy my web page and make sure it's SSL. I can bypass the store, or I can use the store. I can also save it as an app package. If I save my this Access app as an app package, the app for Office contained in it is also saved in that app package, so I can move it to a different site. Realize, though, if you reinstantiate it in a site that can't reach that URL, it won't work. So you can start today. You can go up and start learning about apps for Office. I thought Napa was a really good way to learn about the concepts. There's great things online. Go ahead and take a look for that. Visual Studio has a new template. You need the newest version of Visual Studio. By the way, these slides are available in the session. You can download them, so I don't have to write all this stuff down. Here was other sessions we have done. We did these at the SharePoint conference, so you can go find these things and download them. And finally, with Q&A. So with no minutes left, we got to Q&A. So we'll